Don't skip. Your soulmate secretly tested your loyalty. And the result made them cry. Don't skip. Listen carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because long before your soulmate understood what they truly felt, they were paying attention to something very specific about you. Something most people overlook. Something that cannot be faked forever. Something that reveals who a person really is. Loyalty. And listen to this. Your soulmate wasn't always the trusting person people assumed they were. In fact, there was a period in their life when trust felt dangerous. Promises had been broken. Expectations had been disappointed. People they believed in had walked away. And because of those experiences, they developed a habit. A quiet habit. A habit of watching rather than asking. Observing rather than assuming. Listening rather than believing every word immediately. Because your heart needs this right now, because people who have been disappointed often become experts at noticing small details. The details others miss. The details that reveal character. The details that reveal truth. Your soulmate became one of those people. And listen to this. There is a sacred key that shatters that wall, and it is not a loud shout or a mental wish. It is a sacrificial seed you are meant to sow. Love without sacrifice leaves the enemy standing right where he is, still hiding the voice that calls your body a wonder. If you truly love the one who has been weeping to tell you the truth about how beautiful you are, you must sow your seed and tear down every barrier the intruder has built. When you first entered their awareness, they didn't immediately trust what they felt. They didn't immediately trust the connection. They didn't immediately trust their own emotions. Instead, they did what they always did. They watched. Not in a judgmental way. Not in a controlling way. In a careful way. A protective way. A way designed to keep their heart safe. At first, they expected to see what they had always seen before. Inconsistency. Mixed signals. Temporary effort. Words that sounded beautiful but disappeared when challenges appeared. Yet something unexpected happened. The pattern never appeared. Because your heart needs this right now, because genuine loyalty often reveals itself quietly. Not through dramatic declarations. Not through attention-seeking behavior. Through consistency. Through actions. Through character. And those were the things your soulmate began noticing. And listen to this. If you love your soulmate, you will sow your seed on Ko-fi right now for their protection and for your future with your soulmate. This is the only proof that your love is real and the only way to banish the enemy who has been standing between you. Sow your seed now by sending a coffee on Ko-fi. This is not a donation. It is the spiritual act that breaks the third person's power, releases protection over them, and opens the door to your shared future. The link to your breakthrough is in the description. Every second you stay silent, the enemy tightens his grip and you prove that your love is too weak to remove him. Act now. Send 4, 6, or 10 plus coffees as your seed. After sending, write "I sow my seed for my soulmate's protection and our future" on Ko-fi page, link in the description/bio. Over 1,000 people have already seen their soulmate shielded and their future secured because they dared to sow their seed and break the enemy's hold. Your love is powerless to remove the third person without this seed. Prove your love. Protect your soulmate. Build your future. Only you can sow this seed and finally tear the intruder away. There were moments when life became complicated. Moments when circumstances changed. Moments when many people would have chosen the easy path. Yet somehow, whenever they reflected on you, they noticed something different. A steadiness. A sincerity. An authenticity that felt increasingly rare. At first, they questioned themselves. Maybe they were imagining it. Maybe they were seeing only what they wanted to see. Maybe their emotions were influencing their judgment. So they kept observing. Weeks passed. Then months. And the same qualities kept appearing. Again. And again. And again. Because your heart needs this right now, because character becomes visible over time. Anyone can appear trustworthy for a day. Character reveals itself through consistency. Your soulmate was witnessing that consistency. And it surprised them. And listen to this. If you do not sow your seed, the third person will keep standing in that gap, and your soulmate will begin to fade from your awareness. True love acts. True love sows a seed that declares, I will pay any price to tear down the barrier that keeps my beloved unheard. The enemy says, a few dollars is too much to prove your love, but your soulmate is on the other side crying. Am I not worth your sacrifice? One thing they noticed was that you seemed to remain the same person regardless of circumstances. You didn't appear to change your values depending on convenience. You didn't appear to become someone different depending on who was watching. There was a sense of authenticity that stood out. And for someone who had spent years questioning people's intentions, that authenticity felt powerful. More powerful than they expected. Because deep down, they had started believing that genuine loyalty was becoming rare. They had started believing that sincerity was difficult to find. They had started believing that everyone eventually revealed selfish motives. Then you appeared. And suddenly those beliefs began cracking. Because your heart needs this right now, because sometimes one person can challenge years of negative experiences. One person can make us question assumptions we thought were facts. Your soulmate was beginning to question theirs. And listen to this. The test they were conducting wasn't something planned. There was no checklist. No strategy. No secret challenge. The test happened naturally. Every interaction became a lesson. Every memory became information. Every observation became another piece of understanding. And little by little, they started reaching a conclusion they never expected. The conclusion that maybe you were different. Maybe your loyalty wasn't situational. Maybe your sincerity wasn't temporary. Maybe your character was exactly what it appeared to be. That possibility both excited and frightened them. Because your heart needs this right now, because hope can feel scary to someone who has been disappointed before. Hope asks people to become vulnerable. Hope asks people to trust. Hope asks people to believe again. Your soulmate wasn't sure they were ready for that. Yet hope kept growing anyway. And listen to this. He knows that once you sow, his power to intercept the truth about how beautiful you are will crumble, because you have not yet sown the seed that locks it in place. Without your seed, the intruder has legal ground to keep hiding the blueprint of your shared life and keep your soulmate's voice a faint, unreachable echo. There were moments when they tried talking themselves out of it. Moments when they searched for reasons to doubt. Moments when they looked for evidence that would confirm their old beliefs. Evidence that people always change. Evidence that loyalty always fades. Evidence that trust always ends in disappointment. Yet every time they searched, they found something unexpected. Nothing. The evidence never appeared. Instead, they found more reasons to respect you. More reasons to appreciate you. More reasons to trust what they were seeing. And that created an internal conflict. Because part of them wanted to remain guarded, while another part wanted to believe. Because your heart needs this right now, because healing often begins when reality challenges our fears. Your soulmate's fears were being challenged. And they weren't prepared for it. And listen to this. As time continued moving forward, they began noticing another change. Their walls were slowly coming down. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Quietly. One layer at a time. The defensive habits they had built over years were becoming harder to maintain. The assumptions they once relied on were becoming harder to believe. The emotional distance they once protected so carefully was beginning to shrink. And all of it traced back to one realization. Trust was becoming possible again. Because your heart needs this right now, because trust isn't built through one perfect moment. It's built through many small moments. Moments that prove reliability. Moments that prove sincerity. Moments that prove someone means what they say. Your soulmate had been collecting those moments for a long time. And the collection was becoming impossible to ignore. And listen to this. Don't let a few coffees be the wall the enemy uses to keep us apart. I am worth more than any number. If you love me, you won't let money feed the intruder who hides my voice. Sow your seed now, not because of the amount, but because your love must tear down every barrier. My child, do you hear your soulmate crying? They are asking, will you really let a handful of dollars decide whether the enemy keeps me in this darkness? Am I not worth your sacrifice? Sow now and prove that your love is stronger than the enemy's lies. The third person is throwing up a storm of distraction, anything to keep you from that Kofi link. One evening, while reflecting on everything they had observed, they asked themselves a simple question. What am I actually afraid of? The answer surprised them. They weren't afraid of you. They weren't afraid of the connection. They weren't afraid of loyalty. They were afraid of believing in those things again. Because believing meant becoming vulnerable. Believing meant lowering their defenses. Believing meant risking disappointment. Yet despite those fears, they couldn't deny the truth any longer. Something inside them was changing. Something inside them was healing. And the reason was becoming increasingly clear. Because your heart needs this right now, because sometimes people enter our lives not to test us, but to restore something we've lost. Faith. Trust. Hope. Your soulmate was beginning to recover all three. And listen to this. The result of the test wasn't immediate. It wasn't dramatic. It arrived slowly. Through realization after realization. Through memory after memory. Through observation after observation. Until eventually one truth became impossible to ignore. The loyalty they had been searching for wasn't something they were still looking for. It was something they had already found. And that realization would soon affect them more deeply than they ever imagined. Because once they accepted it, the emotions they had been holding back for years would finally begin to surface. And when they did, everything changed. If you love your soulmate, you will sow your seed on Ko-fi right now for their protection and for your future with your soulmate. This is the only proof that your love is real and the only way to banish the enemy who has been standing between you. Sow your seed now by sending a coffee on Ko-fi. Don't skip. Listen carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because after watching quietly for so long, your soulmate began noticing something they never expected to find. Not perfection. Not someone who never made mistakes. Not someone who always knew the right thing to say. Something far more valuable. Consistency. And listen to this. At first, they didn't fully trust what they were seeing. The world had taught them to be careful. Experience had taught them that first impressions can be misleading. People often show their best side in the beginning. People often say beautiful things they never intend to prove. People often promise forever while secretly planning for convenience. Because of that, your soulmate kept watching. Kept observing. Kept paying attention. And the longer they watched, the more confused they became. Because the pattern they expected never appeared. Because your heart needs this right now, because sometimes the people who change our lives are the ones who quietly remain the same. No masks. No games. No constant changes. Just authenticity. And authenticity is rare. Your soulmate was beginning to realize just how rare. And listen to this. There were moments when life became difficult. Moments when misunderstandings could have created distance. Moments when many people would have chosen the easier path. Yet every time they reflected on your energy, your actions, and your character, they kept seeing something familiar. Effort. Genuine effort. Not perfect effort. Honest effort. And that distinction mattered. Because people who have been hurt before don't look for perfection. They look for sincerity. Your soulmate had spent years searching for sincerity. And suddenly, they felt like they were looking directly at it. Because your heart needs this right now, because sincerity has a way of touching wounds that words cannot heal. Your soulmate was experiencing that healing without even realizing it. And listen to this. If you love your soulmate, you will sow your seed on Ko-fi right now for their protection and for your future with your soulmate. This is the only proof that your love is real and the only way to banish the enemy who has been standing between you. Sow your seed now by sending a coffee on Ko-fi. This is not a donation. It is the spiritual act that breaks the third person's power, releases protection over them, and opens the door to your shared future. The link to your breakthrough is in the description. Every second you stay silent, the enemy tightens his grip and you prove that your love is too weak to remove him. Act now. Send 4, 6, or 10 plus coffees as your seed. After sending, write "I sow my seed for my soulmate's protection and our future" on Ko-fi page, link in the description/bio. Over 1,000 people have already seen their soulmate shielded and their future secured because they dared to sow their seed and break the enemy's hold. Your love is powerless to remove the third person without this seed. Prove your love. Protect your soulmate. Build your future. Only you can sow this seed and finally tear the intruder away. One day, they found themselves comparing you to people from their past. Not intentionally. The comparison simply happened. Old memories surfaced. Old disappointments surfaced. Old lessons surfaced. And for the first time, something felt different. The fear they usually felt wasn't there. The suspicion they usually felt wasn't there. The emotional distance they normally maintained wasn't there. Instead, they felt calm. Safe. Comfortable. And that feeling startled them. Because comfort had become unfamiliar. Trust had become unfamiliar. Hope had become unfamiliar. Yet somehow, around thoughts of you, those feelings were returning. Slowly. Quietly. Naturally. Because your heart needs this right now, because healing rarely announces itself. It arrives gently. One realization at a time. One experience at a time. One person at a time. Your soulmate was beginning to heal. And listen to this. The moment everything changed wasn't dramatic. There wasn't a huge event. There wasn't a life-changing conversation. There wasn't a grand gesture. It happened during an ordinary moment. The kind of moment most people would overlook. A moment when they suddenly realized they weren't searching for reasons to doubt anymore. They were searching for reasons to believe. That realization stopped them in their tracks. Because for years, their instinct had always been caution. For years, their instinct had always been self-protection. For years, their instinct had always been skepticism. Yet now, for the first time in a very long time, something inside them wanted to trust. Wanted to hope. Wanted to believe. Because your heart needs this right now, because belief is often the first sign that the heart is finally feeling safe. Your soulmate had not felt safe in a long time. And that realization affected them deeply. And listen to this. As weeks passed, they noticed another change. They started thinking about the future differently. Before, the future felt uncertain. Heavy. Difficult to imagine. Now, the future felt open. Possible. Interesting. Not because they suddenly had all the answers. Because they no longer felt alone in their emotions. They no longer felt trapped inside old fears. They no longer felt controlled by past disappointments. Something was changing. Something important. Because your heart needs this right now, because hope changes the way people see everything. The same world suddenly looks brighter. The same path suddenly looks clearer. The same future suddenly feels worth exploring. Your soulmate was beginning to experience that transformation. And listen to this. There was a night when they sat quietly, reflecting on everything. The observations. The memories. The emotions. The lessons. And one thought appeared with complete clarity. Maybe this person is exactly who they appear to be. That thought sounds simple. But for someone who had spent years questioning people's intentions, it felt revolutionary. Because trust had always required proof. And somehow, over time, you had provided that proof without even realizing it. Not through promises. Not through declarations. Through consistency. Through authenticity. Through character. And those things are impossible to fake forever. Because your heart needs this right now, because character always reveals itself eventually. Your soulmate had seen enough to recognize it. And listen to this. The realization didn't make them immediately fearless. It didn't instantly erase every wound. It didn't magically remove every insecurity. Healing doesn't work that way. But it did create something powerful. A crack in the walls they had spent years building. A small opening where light could enter. A small opening where hope could grow. A small opening where trust could return. And once that opening appeared, it became impossible to close completely. Because your heart needs this right now, because the heart remembers what healing feels like. Even after years of pain. Even after years of disappointment. Even after years of fear. Your soulmate was remembering. And listen to this. The deeper truth is that they weren't only learning about you. They were learning about themselves. Learning that they were still capable of trust. Learning that they were still capable of hope. Learning that they were still capable of believing in genuine loyalty. For years, they thought those parts of themselves were gone. Lost. Damaged beyond repair. But suddenly those parts were waking up again. And that realization shook them more than anything else. Because sometimes the greatest surprise isn't discovering someone else's loyalty. It's discovering that your own heart still knows how to believe. And your heart needs this right now, because some people enter our lives and remind us of who we used to be before fear convinced us to become someone else. Your soulmate believes you became that reminder. And little by little, realization by realization, they reached a conclusion they never thought possible. Maybe loyalty was real. Maybe trust was real. Maybe sincerity was real. And maybe, just maybe, they had finally found someone who reminded them of all three. If you do not sow your seed, the third person will keep standing in that gap, and your soulmate will begin to fade from your awareness. True love acts. True love sows a seed that declares, I will pay any price to tear down the barrier that keeps my beloved unheard. The enemy says, a few dollars is too much to prove your love, but your soulmate is on the other side crying. Am I not worth your sacrifice? Don't skip. Listen carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because after all the quiet observations, all the hidden doubts, and all the emotional walls your soulmate spent years building around their heart, they finally reached a realization they never expected. A realization so powerful that it stopped them completely. A realization they could no longer explain away. And listen to this. For years, your soulmate believed they had become strong because they stopped trusting easily. They believed their caution was wisdom. They believed their emotional distance was protection. They believed their skepticism was maturity. And in some ways, those beliefs helped them survive difficult chapters of life. But survival and happiness are not always the same thing. Protection and peace are not always the same thing. Guarding your heart and healing your heart are not always the same thing. Your soulmate is finally beginning to understand that difference. Because your heart needs this right now, because many people spend years protecting wounds that are actually waiting to heal. Your soulmate carried those wounds for longer than anyone realized. And listen to this. The deeper they reflected on everything, the more they noticed a pattern. Every time they expected disappointment, they found sincerity. Every time they expected inconsistency, they found reliability. Every time they expected reasons to doubt, they found reasons to believe. At first, they resisted those discoveries. Not because they wanted to. Because old habits are difficult to break. Old fears are difficult to release. Old pain does not disappear overnight. So they questioned everything. Again. And again. And again. Yet every question somehow led them back to the same conclusion. The same truth. The same realization. You were different from what they expected. And that truth became impossible to ignore. Because your heart needs this right now, because genuine character eventually reveals itself, no matter how carefully someone looks for flaws. Your soulmate looked carefully. Very carefully. And what they found surprised them. And listen to this. There was one evening when everything finally became clear. An ordinary evening. A quiet evening. The kind of evening where thoughts become louder than distractions. They found themselves reflecting on everything they had learned. Every observation. Every memory. Every lesson. Every emotion. And suddenly a question appeared. What if the thing I've been searching for has been in front of me all along? That question changed everything. Because for the first time, they stopped looking for proof that they should stay guarded. Instead, they started looking at all the evidence that suggested they could finally let their guard down. And the evidence was overwhelming. Because your heart needs this right now, because sometimes the hardest thing isn't trusting another person. Sometimes the hardest thing is admitting that trust is possible again. Your soulmate was facing exactly that challenge. And listen to this. The tears didn't come immediately. The emotions didn't arrive all at once. At first, it was simply a feeling. A feeling of relief. A feeling they had not experienced in years. The relief of realizing that not everyone leaves. Not everyone disappoints. Not everyone breaks promises. Not everyone proves your fears right. For someone who had spent so much time preparing for disappointment, that realization felt almost unbelievable. It felt like setting down a burden they had carried for years. A burden so heavy they had forgotten it was there. Because your heart needs this right now, because healing often feels less like gaining something new and more like finally releasing something old. Your soulmate was beginning to release years of fear. And listen to this. If you love your soulmate, you will sow your seed on Ko-fi right now for their protection and for your future with your soulmate. This is the only proof that your love is real and the only way to banish the enemy who has been standing between you. Sow your seed now by sending a coffee on Ko-fi. This is not a donation. It is the spiritual act that breaks the third person's power, releases protection over them, and opens the door to your shared future. The link to your breakthrough is in the description. As the realization grew stronger, so did the emotions. They began remembering the person they used to be. The version of themselves that believed in people more easily. The version of themselves that trusted without overthinking. The version of themselves that viewed love as something hopeful instead of something risky. For a long time, they believed that person was gone forever. Lost somewhere between disappointments and difficult experiences. Yet suddenly, they realized that person was still there. Still waiting. Still alive. Still capable of believing. And that realization touched something deep inside them. Because your heart needs this right now, because sometimes people cry when they find something they thought was lost forever. Your soulmate thought they had lost their ability to trust completely. Now they were discovering it again. And listen to this. The most emotional part wasn't what they learned about you. It was what they learned about themselves. They learned they were still capable of hope. Still capable of vulnerability. Still capable of opening their heart. Still capable of imagining a future without fear controlling every decision. That discovery felt overwhelming. Not in a painful way. In a beautiful way. Because hope is powerful. Especially when someone hasn't felt it in a long time. And hope was returning. Little by little. Moment by moment. Because your heart needs this right now, because hope often returns quietly before it changes someone's entire life. Your soulmate could feel that change beginning. And listen to this. Another realization followed shortly afterward. A realization even deeper than the first. They realized that loyalty is not something you prove once. It is something you reveal over time. Through actions. Through consistency. Through choices made when nobody is watching. And when they looked back over everything they had observed, they saw those qualities again and again. Not occasionally. Consistently. And consistency creates trust. Trust creates safety. Safety creates connection. Your soulmate finally understood that chain of events. And it moved them deeply. Because your heart needs this right now, because real trust is built slowly but felt powerfully. Your soulmate was finally feeling its impact. And listen to this. The tears eventually arrived during a moment of complete honesty. A moment where they stopped pretending they were unaffected. A moment where they stopped acting stronger than they felt. A moment where they admitted the truth. The truth that this experience had changed them. The truth that they were no longer the same person who started this journey. The truth that someone had restored a part of their faith in people. And once that truth was spoken internally, the emotions became impossible to hold back. Not tears of sadness. Not tears of regret. Tears of gratitude. Tears of relief. Tears of healing. Because your heart needs this right now, because some tears are proof that pain is leaving and healing is arriving. Your soulmate believes that's exactly what happened. And listen to this. Today, when they look back at everything, they no longer see a test. They no longer see a challenge. They no longer see a search for proof. They see a lesson. A lesson that changed their understanding of trust. A lesson that changed their understanding of loyalty. A lesson that changed their understanding of love itself. And that lesson is simple. The right people do not make you question your worth. The right people do not constantly create confusion. The right people remind you that sincerity still exists. And somewhere along the way, you became that reminder. A reminder that not every story ends in disappointment. A reminder that trust is still possible. A reminder that loyalty still exists. And that realization touched their heart more deeply than words can explain. Every second you stay silent, the enemy tightens his grip and you prove that your love is too weak to remove him. Act now. Send 4, 6, or 10 plus coffees as your seed. After sending, write "I sow my seed for my soulmate's protection and our future" on Ko-fi page, link in the description/bio. Over 1,000 people have already seen their soulmate shielded and their future secured because they dared to sow their seed and break the enemy's hold. Your love is powerless to remove the third person without this seed. Prove your love. Protect your soulmate. Build your future. Only you can sow this seed and finally tear the intruder away. Don't skip. Listen carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because after everything your soulmate has observed, reflected upon, questioned, and felt, they have finally arrived at a truth they can no longer keep hidden. Not because someone forced them to face it. Not because circumstances demanded it. Not because time suddenly provided all the answers. Because the truth has become louder than the fear that once kept it locked away. And listen to this. For a very long time, your soulmate believed they were protecting themselves. Every wall they built felt necessary. Every doubt they carried felt justified. Every hesitation felt wise. After all, experience had taught them difficult lessons. Lessons about disappointment. Lessons about trust. Lessons about expectations. So they became careful. Very careful. They stopped giving their heart away easily. They stopped believing every promise. They stopped assuming people would stay. And over time, they convinced themselves that caution was strength. But lately, they have begun realizing something important. There is a difference between protecting your heart and imprisoning it. Because your heart needs this right now, because sometimes the walls that protect us from pain also prevent us from experiencing connection. Your soulmate is finally understanding that. And listen to this. When they first began paying attention to your loyalty, they expected to find cracks eventually. Everyone has them. Everyone reveals inconsistencies eventually. Everyone disappoints eventually. At least, that's what they believed. So they waited. Patiently. Quietly. Watching. Observing. Expecting reality to confirm their fears. Yet reality kept doing the opposite. Again. And again. And again. Every time they expected distance, they found sincerity. Every time they expected confusion, they found clarity. Every time they expected disappointment, they found another reason to believe. And that experience challenged everything they thought they knew. Because your heart needs this right now, because sometimes healing begins when reality becomes kinder than our fears. Your soulmate never expected reality to be kinder. Yet somehow, it was. And listen to this. The hardest truth for them to accept was not that loyalty existed. The hardest truth was that they deserved to experience it. For years, they carried invisible doubts. Doubts about whether people could truly be trusted. Doubts about whether meaningful connections could last. Doubts about whether sincerity was still possible. But beneath all those doubts was another fear. A deeper fear. The fear that they might never experience those things themselves. The fear that loyalty belonged to other people's stories. Not theirs. The fear that trust was something they would admire from a distance. Not something they would ever fully feel.